Good morning. My name is Your Name. From the very beginning, I have been driven by curiosity, not just about the world, but about people, systems, and the unseen forces that shape our society. I come from city state, where I learned early that responsibility and action define character more than words ever can. Academically, I completed my year highest education from your college university, specializing in your field, but knowledge alone never satisfied me. I sought challenges that tested my resilience, my decision making, and my ability to understand human dynamics, the very skills that define leadership. I have consistently worked on projects and initiatives that combine vision with execution. Briefly mention one or two key achievements, e.g., volunteering, research, social projects, leadership experiences. These experiences taught me that influence is not granted by title alone, it is earned by observation, empathy, and precision. For me, joining the civil services is not merely a career choice. It is an opportunity to transform systems from within, to implement justice where it is denied, and to create sustainable impact. I believe in strategy, patience, and clarity, the same qualities that have guided me through challenges and failures alike. Ultimately, I aim to serve not just with authority, but with awareness, to understand hidden patterns, uncover opportunities, and bring meaningful change. I aspire to embody the very principles that the script I admire conveys. Knowledge is power, patience is strength, and precision shapes destiny. I am ready to contribute, not just as an officer, but as a strategist, a learner, and a change maker in the nation's journey. The first sound you remember is not yours. It is the scrape of a chair across a polished floor, but it carries a weight far heavier than furniture. You think it's mundane, insignificant, but that sound carries a warning most people never notice until it's too late. In that room, history waits, hidden beneath layers of smiles, etiquette, and whispered family stories. A child falls, 9 years old, so light that the world barely notices the absence of her breath. And yet, in that silence, the truth screams louder than any shout. Power is not what you are taught, it is what you survive. I watched him raise his hand, the authority of generations behind it. A hand that had been worshipped, feared, and obeyed by everyone in its orbit. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I cataloged. Observation is the first step in understanding control. That day, a life lesson hid in plain sight. It wasn't mercy that mattered, it was precision. The floor caught the child, her head didn't bounce. That was the first mercy, accidental and unseen by most. But what the hand intended, what it represented, would not go unnoticed by me. This was my grandfather's legacy, my father's throne, the invisible machinery of dominance passed down like a cursed coin. Most people never see the threads of manipulation. They see only the surface, a smile, a compliment, a reprimand. But power moves like a river beneath the ground, invisible, relentless, unstoppable until it floods and reshapes everything. That day I saw the current. I understood how authority, when combined with fear, bends the world to its will. My father, the man I once worshipped, was gravity itself. Every gesture, every command was a planet around which lives spun, silently obeying the law of his presence. And yet, even gravity can be measured. Even the strongest current has weakness. I cataloged, I watched, I learned. Each smile that hid disdain, each casual correction of a child's name, each amendment to a will, all of it was evidence. Power is never careless, but arrogance blinds those who wield it. Arrogance is a door, and I learned where the hinges were. That day, as blood and silence filled the room, a path revealed itself, not of rebellion, not of shouting, but of patience, strategy, and quiet, unavoidable just. This is where the story begins, not with what was lost, but with what was noticed. Not with fear, but with the awakening of understanding that some gifts are traps, some words are weapons, and some legacies are curses meant to be broken. You think inheritance is about money, property, or titles. That is what they want you to believe. But true inheritance is far older, far darker. It is about control. Every word spoken in that house, every rule enforced, every gift given was not generosity. It was a test, an experiment in obedience. My father's hands weren't just hands, they were instruments of legacy calibrated to measure worthiness, and I began to see that the passbook, that so-called trash, was not trivial. It was a key, a breadcrumb left carelessly by a man who believed his power eternal. But power always has a flaw. He didn't realize the flaws in the arrogance and thinking love and loyalty are limitless, like they could be dictated. I started quietly, methodically, observing the patterns that had been invisible to me as a child. The way his eyes lingered longer on certain people, the way his corrections carried weight that wasn't just about etiquette, it was about subordination, the way a birthday gift or a simple sentence could determine whether you had a place in his orbit or were destined for erasure. By the time I realized what I was seeing, the house had become a laboratory of power, and I, unwillingly, had become the student who would master it. Every family meeting, every dinner, every casual comment was coded. Temporary, he had written in his will. Temporary. That word hit me like a hammer. It was not just instruction, it was verdict. It was an announcement: you are expendable. The child, my daughter, was expendable, and yet the path to rewriting that reality did not lie in confrontation. That would be obvious. That would be loud. That would fail. No, it required patience, observation, understanding the machinery beneath the surface. Each trust, each account, each foundation position was a lever waiting to be pulled. And I began cataloging, recording, decoding, learning the architecture of power. By the end of that first week, the room had shifted. The invisible rules had been exposed to my vision. I understood something fundamental: power is not given, it is assumed, but only temporarily. And the moment someone else learns the code, the throne becomes movable. I remember the first time I saw him underestimate me. The glance, the shrug, the smile of someone so confident that arrogance itself became a weapon. Most people never notice when the weapon turns inward. But I noticed. Every careless word, every casual dismissal, every small act of cruelty became proof. Proof that authority can blind itself, proof that no throne is safe from precision. It was a calculated exposure, a forwarded email, a mistake from his own family. It revealed the will's true intent: bloodline only, the child, my daughter, a temporary arrangement. He had underestimated me because I appeared to play by his rules. But obedience, when wielded knowingly, is a weapon. I cataloged that email, every clause, every implication. I began to map his empire of influence, its weak points, the hinges of control that had allowed him to dominate for decades. Power is a language. Most speak it without knowing grammar. Fewer understand the syntax. The syntax dictates who survives, who thrives, who is erased. And in that syntax lies vulnerability. I began learning it, reading it, translating it. Every foundation, every bank account, every trust was a word in his sentence. And every word could be turned against him if read correctly. By the end of that week, I was no longer a participant in the household. I had become an observer, and observers, when patient, eventually become architects. The old gift, the passbook, was a symbol, overlooked and discarded. But symbols are powerful. They carry meaning beyond the obvious, beyond the material. That passbook contained more than numbers. It contained legacy, control, and proof of intent. And proof, when gathered correctly, is unstoppable. I began tracking accounts, confirming signatures, checking records. Each detail revealed arrogance. He had assumed invisibility. He had assumed loyalty was permanent. He had assumed love could be manipulated without consequence. And yet, the greatest lesson I learned was the same lesson power itself teaches: arrogance is a door, and someone patient, someone observing, someone willing to wait can open it. By now, the room felt different. Silence carried weight. Every interaction was measured. My father, unaware, began to reveal more than he intended. Casual remarks, small dismissals, they were pieces of the architecture of control. I recorded them. Every word became evidence, a map of influence. And with maps comes strategy. Strategy is power. Knowledge of weakness becomes leverage, and leverage becomes movement. I met with lawyers, not to threaten, not to confront, but to gather knowledge, knowledge that was hidden in plain sight. Trusts, assets, dual signatures, leveraged properties, all were levers of control, all instruments of authority. I cataloged every nuance, every restriction, every loophole he left exposed through his own arrogance. The machinery of dominance had flaws, and flaws can be exploited, not violently, but precisely. Power moves invisibly. Most people feel it only when it crushes them. I moved within it like a shadow. I contacted the board, asked questions that seemed casual, innocent, but were anything but. His answers betrayed contempt, not caution, and I recorded them. Not for malice, but for proof. Proof transforms perception. Proof awakens authority. Proof dismantles the throne of the arrogant. By now, I had learned a fundamental truth. Revenge is not about hurt. It is about removal. Removing the hand that believed it could strike without consequence. Removing the illusion that control is permanent. Removing the arrogance that clouds vision. And the house, the legacy, the empire of influence, all were maps leading to the inevitable. The inevitable was patient. The inevitable was precise. And the inevitable was mine to orchestrate. Halfway through this descent, you, the viewer, must lock in what you've witnessed. Comment the phrase "I see the code" twice in the comments. This is not idle repetition. It is identity. It is acknowledgement of awareness. It is the first step in understanding how power hides in plain sight. The first rule of observing power is simple: never let the wielder know you understand it. He had spent decades teaching obedience, loyalty, and fear as currency. Every gesture I made, every word I spoke was measured against his invisible scales. But I no longer sought approval. I cataloged, I recorded, I deciphered. The foundation he controlled, the trust he manipulated, the family he believed unbreakable. All were riddles written in arrogance, and every riddle has a solution. Every fortress has a door. The passbook was that door. Its value lay not in currency, but in proof, a testament to intent, carelessly exposed. Power, I realized, is not violent by nature. It is subtle, insidious. The most dangerous authority is the one that doesn't appear to be threatening. My father's cruelty was quiet at first, almost imperceptible, woven into traditions, celebrations, and ordinary moments. But in the quiet, in the pauses between words, the intent screamed. It is there that obedience becomes enslavement, loyalty becomes leverage, and love becomes a weapon. And it is there that one learns the true measure of a man and how to dismantle him without ever raising a hand. I began tracing every move he made with a meticulous eye. Foundation decisions, charitable donations, account transfers. Nothing was random. Everything was a signal, a test, a mechanism to reinforce the narrative he had crafted for himself, that his bloodline, his legacy was untouchable. But his confidence became my map. Arrogance is always sloppy. Mistakes hide in patterns, and patterns reveal more than any confession ever could. I spoke casually to his associates, posing as the obedient daughter, the caring family member, but every word or every question was a probe, and with each answer a weakness emerged. An overreach here, a miswording there, a misjudgment that revealed not power but insecurity masquerading as dominance. It was intoxicating to see it unfold. The invisible control that had once seemed absolute was riddled with gaps, doors left unlocked, mechanisms left vulnerable. At night, I replayed every incident in my mind, every correction, every dismissal, every phrase he used to reinforce hierarchy. And I realized the greatest secret he believed hidden, he was terrified of replacement. Authority is only as strong as belief. Once belief fractures, so too does control. The child he dismissed, the one he labeled temporary, became not a threat to him, but a mirror reflecting his vulnerability. And mirrors are dangerous for tyrants. They cannot abide their own reflection when truth exposes the cracks. I mapped it all, the trust accounts, the board positions, the language in emails, the loopholes he left exposed through arrogance. Each observation was a brushstroke painting the image of inevitable displacement. And I learned that patience amplifies power more than confrontation ever could. The house itself became a battlefield of observation. Objects, gestures, seating arrangements, they were all data points. He did not see me cataloging, calculating, understanding. He thought I was obedient. He thought I was loyal. And the miscalculation is always fatal for those who wield authority without foresight. Control is an illusion. An illusion can be dissected, analyzed, and replaced with reality. I began preparing for the moment when authority would shift. Not with anger, not with rebellion, but with strategy, timing, and inevitability. Each recorded conversation, each documented action, each meticulously traced step became part of a web. And in webs, control is not seized by force. It is inherited by the one who understands its structure better than the weaver. Every legal consultation became a revelation. Not about law, but about structure. How a foundation's board can override a founder. How trust clauses can be triggered by intent. How recorded evidence, when aligned with precise knowledge, can dismantle a lifetime of control without violence. I realized then that authority is fragile, absolute only in perception, and perception can be changed, slowly, relentlessly, permanently. I remember the day I realized I'd already begun replacing him in every sphere of influence. Every carefully observed weakness, every document traced, every casual misstep. These were not just tools, they were signs. The throne he believed permanent was already moving beneath him, and he did not see it. Pride blinds, and the fall of the proud is always silent until the last moment. The child, my daughter, became a symbol, not for me, but for the system I was about to dismantle. He saw her as temporary, a placeholder. I saw her as the mirror that would reveal him. And mirrors are dangerous for tyrants because they show the reflection of what is being lost, the vulnerability behind the facade of control. Everything I did from this point forward was deliberate, precise, calculated. Justice is quiet, justice waits, and the throne, no matter how long held, is not immune. By this point, I had mastered the art of invisibility within observation. I knew every flaw, every miscalculation, every overconfidence that had protected him for decades. I understood that power moves like water. It is fluid. It finds every crack. It flows into every weakness. And I had mapped every crack, every hidden route, every opportunity for inevitability. The stage was set, and yet the most important tool in this operation was patience. Patience is more dangerous than anger. Patience wears down the arrogant until even their strongest defenses crumble silently. There is a moment in every long operation when preparation stops feeling like preparation and starts feeling like destiny. You wake up one day and realize you are no longer collecting pieces, you are arranging them. The web is no longer theoretical, it exists, it is tight, and something ancient inside you recognizes the pattern. Predators feel this before the strike. Architects feel it before the final stone is laid. Empires feel it before they collapse. By then, my father had already begun sensing something he couldn't name. Authority, when it has been absolute for too long, becomes dependent on atmosphere. It needs agreement in the air. It needs unchallenged rituals. It needs the quiet cooperation of those orbiting it. And slowly, imperceptibly, that atmosphere had changed. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Board members began requesting confirmations in writing. Bank representatives stopped deferring and started verifying. He didn't know why yet. He only felt the drag, the resistance. The subtle denial of gravity, that is when power becomes dangerous, not to others, to itself, because confused authority lashes out, exposes itself, accelerates its own exposure. And he did. Small outbursts, sharper language, careless phrasing, the very things I needed. He still believed fear was enough. He didn't understand that fear is only effective when it is uncontested. The moment someone stops fearing consequences, fear loses its leverage. I wasn't fearless, I was informed. And information dismantles fear molecule by molecule. I listened, I recorded. I let him speak when he felt strongest. Men reveal their true operating system when they believe they are untouchable. And every time he spoke about bloodlines, about ownership, about who deserved space in the family and who didn't, he was not asserting power, he was documenting it. For me, this is one of the oldest secrets in dark history. Tyrants always write their own indictments. They just don't realize who's reading. The deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just family. It never is. Families are training grounds. They are the first governments a man ever lives under, and like all governments, they teach obedience before they teach truth. They teach hierarchy before they teach identity. They teach fear before they teach understanding. My father did not invent his methods. He inherited them. He was repeating a system older than him, older than his father, older than the language he used to justify it. Legacy families have always understood something the public forgets. Control must be emotional before it can ever be structural. Money is useless without psychological authority. Titles are useless without internalized permission. And permission is cultivated in childhood. I could trace it backward through stories, through the way my grandfather spoke, through the silences in photographs, through the rules that were never written but never broken. Who could speak first? Who decided where people sat? Who was praised publicly and corrected privately? These were not quirks. They were technologies, primitive, effective, and the passbook, the discarded object, was part of that same lineage. Not wealth, documentation, proof of continuity, proof that systems outlive people. That's when I understood what I was actually dismantling. Not a man, a structure, a belief engine, a miniature institution built inside a bloodline and protected by ritual, fear, and selective affection. History is full of these old houses, old names, old money, but the real inheritance is always behavioral, psychological, invisible, and therefore almost indestructible. When you study control long enough, you begin to notice how little of it is physical. Most of it lives in timing, in who is allowed to interrupt, in whose anger must be managed, in whose disappointment feels catastrophic. These are the real currencies of power. My father's favorite weapon was not rage, it was withdrawal, silence, reclassification, the quiet demotion of a person from inner circle to burden. He didn't need to exile people, he made them shrink themselves, and most never noticed it happening until my daughter. He couldn't shrink her, she didn't speak his language, she didn't orbit his approval, she didn't metabolize his disappointment. And because she didn't respond to the technology, she exposed it. That is why he called her temporary. Systems always label what they cannot control, and that is why she became dangerous to him, not emotionally, structurally, because the moment a system fails on one subject, it risks being seen, and the moment it is seen, it can be studied, and once studied, it can be replaced. That was the moment this stopped being about revenge. It became about succession. Every institution falls the same way. Not through assault, through audit, through exposure, through the slow redirection of loyalty. The board members didn't fear him anymore. They feared liability. The bank didn't defer to him anymore. It deferred to documentation. The family didn't orbit him anymore. It waited. Waiting is the most dangerous shift of all. He still spoke like a ruler, but he was being treated like a variable, and variables can be removed. I watched him try to reassert control the only way he knew how, by tightening emotionally, by becoming colder, sharper, more exclusive. He didn't realize that exclusivity only strengthens power when demand exceeds access, and his demand was collapsing. People don't abandon authority when it is cruel. They abandon it when it becomes weak, and weakness always reveals itself first through unpredictability, through mood, through desperation disguised as principle. That is what I was watching. The early convulsions of displacement. There is a myth in modern culture that power is seized. It isn't. It migrates. It moves toward stability, toward coherence, toward whoever appears inevitable. And inevitability is engineered. By then, my name was appearing on documents where his once stood alone. I hadn't announced it. I hadn't demanded it. It had simply started happening because I was the one answering questions, providing clarity, supplying records, anticipating concerns. Control always shifts toward whoever reduces uncertainty. He increased it, I eliminated it. That was the real transfer, not assets, not titles, trust. The closer the moment approached, the quieter I became. There is a stillness that arrives before irreversible events, a narrowing of perception, a removal of excess motion. I was no longer thinking in days, I was thinking in sequences. If this happens, then this. If he speaks, then this moves. If he reacts, this triggers. People imagine justice as explosive. It isn't. It is procedural. The trap had no jaws. It had paperwork, witnesses, signatures, recorded language. The most dangerous cages in history have always been invisible. He still believed Christmas was just Christmas. A ritual, a stage where his authority would be reaffirmed, where seating would encode hierarchy, where tradition would anesthetize memory. He didn't understand that rituals are only powerful when they are uncontested, and that this one had already been rewritten. The house wasn't his anymore, the foundation wasn't his anymore, the narrative wasn't his anymore. He just hadn't been informed yet. There is a particular tragedy to men like him. They do not fall. They are slowly replaced while still standing. By the time that day arrived, the operation was already over. What remained was theater, revelation. The moment the old world discovers it no longer governs the new, and that moment always feels like betrayal to the one being removed, not because it is, but because power cannot conceive of itself as temporary, yet everything is. The day began like any other, except the air had shifted. Even he could feel it. Authority feels different when it is being quietly stripped away. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but it drags against you like a shadow pulling at your soul. I didn't rush, I didn't threaten. I waited, letting the machinery of proof, patience, and inevitability unfold. The board arrived discreet, lawyers arrived silent. My daughter played quietly, unaware of the currents swirling around her, and in that quiet, the old order began to crack. He still smiled at first, unaware. Power is strongest in ignorance, and his ignorance became the stage. Every casual remark he made, every assumption of loyalty, every sneer of superiority became a line of evidence. I simply let it accumulate like snow gathering weight on a roof until it collapsed under its own arrogance. The manager at the bank, the trustee, the board chair, they all knew the rules I had learned, but he did not. And rules, when paired with evidence, are more terrifying than anger. I played no one. I forced nothing. I simply presented reality. Signatures verified, accounts documented, statements confirmed. His voice had been recorded months earlier, exposing contempt, discrimination, and arrogance. It was calm, precise, undeniable, and suddenly, the empire he thought untouchable was being translated in a language he no longer spoke. It was surreal. He looked around the room, seeing familiar faces, familiar rooms, but everything had shifted. Not one action of mine had been loud, none cruel, but the order had changed. Authority had migrated. The throne had moved, and he didn't yet understand that he had lost it. The board voted. The trust clauses triggered, assets frozen, deeds transferred. Every legal mechanism I had meticulously traced, tested, and prepared activated silently, almost invisibly. The clock had run its course. The old order, which had seemed eternal, now obeyed a new authority. And in this moment, I realized the ultimate lesson: power isn't about domination. It's about inevitability, when you control the conditions. When patience, observation, and precision align, victory is not forced. It arrives naturally. He tried to speak. The word failed him. Authority had left the room with him, leaving only the appearance of command, empty and fragile. I told him to leave. I said it softly for my daughter. And he understood only then, too late, that the house, the trust, the empire had been quietly, completely, and legally removed from his control. The child who was temporary had survived not by defiance, but by my understanding of the structures that defined him. And through her, through patience and precision, the narrative of power had been rewritten. This is the truth hidden in plain sight. The strongest hands can be removed without violence, without confrontation, without chaos, if you know how to wait, how to observe, and how to act with surgical precision. Children surprisingly understand justice better than adults. My daughter asked if she did something wrong. I told her no. You showed him who he was. And she nodded, simple as that. It's terrifying how a child, untouched by the conditioning of fear, can illuminate the weaknesses in even the most carefully constructed power structures. Most tyrants fear confrontation. Children expose their irrelevance, and sometimes the greatest lessons are not in shouting, but in showing. I learned that revenge is not loud, revenge is not cruelty, revenge is removal. It is the systematic extraction of influence from those who believe themselves untouchable. It is the quiet realignment of order so precise that the vanishing of authority appears inevitable. This is the truth families never admit, institutions never teach, and power never anticipates. But once you see it, You cannot unsee it. You become aware of every hidden lever, every misstep, every vulnerability of those who govern from fear. Power migrates, influence moves, legacy can be rewritten. And the old systems that feel permanent, bloodlines, titles, wealth, tradition, are only as enduring as the minds that maintain belief in them. When understanding replaces fear, when patience replaces rage, when precision replaces reaction, the narrative shifts. And in that shift, identity transforms. I was no longer merely a daughter or a witness. I had become the architect, the inheritor, not of wealth alone, but of the understanding that makes authority real. History is not written by the loud. It is recorded by the observant. I had cataloged, documented, weighted, and acted within the invisible rules he had assumed eternal. And in doing so, I realized a dangerous truth. The most powerful people are not those who hold titles, money, or fame. They are those who control perception, who manipulate expectation, who disguise inevitability as choice. And the moment someone else learns the code, the throne moves. Always, I sat on the floor that night with my daughter. The house was silent. The old empire had fallen quietly around us. The passbook, once trash, had been a key. Every document, every recorded word, every subtle calculation had been necessary to rewrite a legacy of fear and control. She understood, though she was young, authority is not eternal, influence is conditional, legacy is never permanent, and knowledge, dangerous, precise, patient knowledge, is more powerful than any throne. The truth I reveal to you, viewer, is not a story. It is a warning, a lesson, and a key. Observe carefully. Understand the machinery of control. Patience is your ally. Knowledge is your weapon. And remember, power migrates silently, inevitably, toward the one who is prepared to inherit it.